I think I know, I'm hoping more people will get on today. But I think I know everyone that's on, most of you, I think I know. But I am Reneé Hillman. So I have Hillman Real Estate Group here at EXP. Entering my 21st year of real estate, which sounds crazy to even be saying right now. But apparently I've gotten older in the process. But we were trying to, obviously coming up with topics for trainings, we do a lot of brainstorming, and one of the ones that we noticed that a lot of people were coming to us asking were, what's the next steps, right? You're doing a good, individual business, what does that look like moving forward? And obviously I think the great thing with real estate is, we can all run our businesses the way that we would like to. Obviously everyone has different goals in mind and those type of things. So I do think one, important component when deciding, okay, is this the right time to hire an assistant, or what does that look like? Obviously everyone has a little bit different way, I think, to manage tasks, some more efficient than others. So I think the big question we tend to get a lot is, okay, well, when do I hire? And I think that's really more of a personal decision, right? I personally got to a point where I think I was making myself sick from running around all over the place, worrying about, did I remember that, having nightmares about houses being eaten up by termites? I mean, you name it. I realized at that point I was kind of in overload. And I've been very fortunate throughout the years to really have some great mentors. So I would encourage you guys to really speak to other agents, businesses that you see where maybe, is the direction that you want to go, to really deep dive into some of these questions. Cause I think, all of this is really more on an individual basis too. But I kind of got the, I'm running around with my chicken with a, head cut off kind of syndrome, as I called it, where, I mean, there was so much things going on, obviously personal care, a lot of things like that were just being kind of put to the wayside. And I mean, gosh, we're going all the way back probably to about 2004-ish timeframe, 2003 even. But, I was also working about 80 to 100-hour work weeks. So I was working, 6 days a week. Even though I said I took off Sundays, I was still, if I was in a negotiation or something like that, still working, crazy hours. I mean, and this even continued prior to my team, where I was 8 months pregnant, closing like 15, 16 deals in a month, going, why am I doing this? Because I was getting up every morning at like 5 and not stopping work until 10, which obviously probably wasn't the best thing to do at 8 months pregnant. So, I think, making that decision to hire that assistant, it's a little bit scary, right? And I think we can all say that we've hired some really good people and we've hired some really bad people. One thing, and I don't know if Marty's actually on this, but she was one to always tell me this is, hire slow, fire fast, pretty quickly whether someone's a good fit or not. And obviously that first 2 to 3 weeks is really, you're doing a lot of training, pouring a lot of time and energy into it. So what I'm hoping today is that I can help you kind of establish some ground rules, so to speak, before even getting into the hiring process, that looking back on it really kind of helped me hire the right people as opposed to the wrong people. I'm fortunate that my husband, he has interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people. So go to the people that are doing things well and right, because I ask people a lot of questions. I know that's shocking to everyone on here probably that know me better than others. I ask a lot of questions. So I talk to a lot of different agents. I also talk to a lot of people outside of the industry. So a couple of the common things that I figured out is hiring an assistant was the first thing that I needed to do, right? When you think of a house and a foundation, that is your foundational piece. That is, what kind of helps the team, as you grow, those kind of things. That foundation is your most important piece. So in my mind, hiring that assistant, and it was important to me to have someone that was there with me, not necessarily a virtual, obviously there's a lot of different options with that. but hiring that assistant, that was with me was important, at that time. So if you don't have a strong foundation, right, it's very hard to continue to build a team because at some point something's going to crack, crumble, do something, and then you're going to have to start all over again. And it, like I said, it's a big time investment when you're, um, you know, getting to that point where you want to hire that assistant. So those were kind of my two things. I was running around with the chicken with its head cut off. I was working way too many hours, and Marty actually said something to me, and this will, age me too, was, why are you doing $10 an hour tasks? Obviously now it's probably, $15 to $20 hour tasks, but point being is, why are you doing those? What I was really, really good at was closing deals. So when I kind of really sat down and thought about that, I said, oh, that's probably a good point, because if I could free up those hours each day that I was doing, data entry, just, you know, the stuff that you don't really need to do, but have to do, right? I could do what I was really good at, which was making money, for the team. So, or myself at that point. So that was another basis. So from there, I really spent a lot of time. I'm a big list maker. So I spent some time really kind of establishing, okay, what do I do on a daily basis, right? I think agents are really good about chasing squirrels all day long. But really when you sit down and say, okay, what am I really doing all day long? I think that's important, because as you kind of establish what those habits are that you're doing every day, then you can really look at that list and see, okay, what can I get off my plate? And it makes it very apparent. Sharon's really strong with that 80-20 rule. 80% of the things that you're doing really can be moved off to someone else, so you can focus on the 20% that is producing income for yourself or team. So I think that list, I'm famous for my list. I love having lists to kind of figure out, what task I need to, move off of me to someone else. And I still do that to this day, because obviously as you grow, your changes, you'll change, and then your needs and things like that will also change with it. Sorry, I'm just looking back at my notes here real quick. So I think making that list and establishing what you can take off of your plate. And then of course, by making that list, you can really put a really good job description together from there of what you're really looking for. Because I will tell you, anytime we put like an administrative assistant or any type of kind of salaried position or even hourly position out there, you will get inundated by applications, especially if you've hit the market correctly. Again, do some research on that, talk to some other agents, see what they're paying their staff, so you kind of know where to start with that. I actually started with a 30-hour a week person originally, or 15 to 20, and then eventually, moved up to that full-time position fairly quickly. The other thing you need to establish too is having someone licensed important to you versus unlicensed. I still think one of the perfect people is someone that maybe did real estate and decided sales isn't really necessarily for me, but I like real estate, but I'm okay being, in a salary or staff type position. Because sometimes what will happen is, and which is okay too, you'll have someone that has an interest in selling real estate that you hire, that has a license, and ends up moving on to sales, which again, that's a risk you're going to take anytime. So another feature I like now, which again wasn't available a long time ago, is the time trackers. Toggle Track is an awesome one, so you can actually track all the tasks you're doing, like even down to which property you're doing those tasks on. I don't know how granular you want to get with it, but that might be a good way to figure out in establishing how many hours you're spending each week on administrative type things, to determine whether you want, a part-time or, full-time person. So I always feel like I'm doing a lot of talking here. Does anyone have any questions right at this point in time? Okay, I'll keep moving. So kind of, again, spending those specific time and energies on that at first, I think are important to establish kind of what you need and want. Pam, did you have a question?
Sorry, no.
Oh, okay. No, I just saw you come back. Okay, I saw you come back on. The other thing that I really spent some time on was assessing what, my strengths and weaknesses were and really where I needed help, right? I think if we all really sit down and look at our business, there's always things that we'd like to be doing, but we're either out of time or, whatever. I mean, one of the key things looking back of what I wish I would have done better was maintaining my database in my earlier years. Your database has so much power and money into it. And because I was so busy doing the sales things, right, I couldn't maintain my database. And in actuality, I could have paid someone, to maintain that database and keep it organized and up to date. So it wasn't like kind of like tax time where it's like, ugh, I don't really want to have to do this or spend the time on it. So that was another thing, again, when I was making my list, that database management, transactional type things like scheduling home inspections, scheduling termite, inspections, all of those kind of things that I could get off my plate. So, but like I said, really taking an inventory of your strengths and weaknesses, like what do you really enjoy doing? What are you really good at? And then getting the other things that you're kind of like, ooh, I could probably use a little help here, some good self-recognition, to get someone to make sure, again, you're hiring that right person for that right seat. The other thing that I set down a lot was goals and vision. So really kind of understanding, okay, where do I want my business to be? Where do I want it to go to? Because of course you can have all these goals, but if you don't have a plan of actions to get to those goals, that's key. So that became very apparent to me that if I wanted to do more sales and kind of gain some of my personal life back, that I needed more help. And like I said, that's where the first, hiring an assistant came in. The other thing is really kind of establishing your core values for, what you want your business to look like. I'm going to try to share this screen here real quick. Oop, Pam, can you give me permission to do a screen share here? You're on mute, Pam.
Sorry. As the Tyler's actually running this one, so I'm not the host.
Okay.
I'll shoot him the message so he
okay.
can share it.
All right. Well, we can come back to that in a second. And actually, another fellow top producer was the one that really said, hey, work on your values. Because what I was kind of getting in this loop where I didn't feel like I was hiring the right people. But by working on those core values, I was able to really develop good questions from that to really ask in an interview to make sure I was asking the right questions. Because what I realized is people interview really well, right? But when it comes down to it, do they have a good work ethic? Do they have those type of things? So asking those diving questions when you're doing interview and making sure that you do talk to their the folks that what do you call them, referrals, like on the resume, or if they offer you, kind of people that recommendations, whatever I'm trying to say. I can't think of the word right now. Because it was funny when I'd call some of those people, they were like, yeah, I probably wouldn't work with that person again. So, when you have those batches of 400 plus people that you're working through, that becomes even more important. And so I would, make sure you're pretty specific in what you're looking for. That was really helpful to me. Let me share. I've got rights to kind of share my screen now. So give me 1 second here, guys. Of course, it's not going to let me share the one that I want to share here. Hold on. Okay. So this was just kind of an example of like our core values. And obviously this again has been one of those works in progress. But, again, I was able to kind of assess, okay, hey, we have a really hardworking, devoted team. How can I ask questions around that that kind of get to the idea, is this person going to be one of those people that like to clock in and out, or is this person really going to buy into, really helping, make, you want someone that's going to elevate you, that really is excited about being on the team. And so we, like I said, spent a lot of time on this. And truthfully, this hasn't really changed that much over the last, 10 to 15 years. Maybe the description's a little bit more, we kind of, pulled it down a little bit. But point being is, this really allowed me to ask the right questions during the interview process. Um, Understanding disc profiles, I think, is another key thing. We have anyone that's applying for a position go ahead and fill one out, because my feeling is, if they're serious enough about the job and not just, throwing in a whole bunch of applications everywhere. My first thing was making sure they're reading the instructions, because if they're not reading the instructions, they're probably not the detail oriented person that I needed for this type of position. So kind of put little tests even in your, job description. Because if you're asking them to do certain things and they're not even doing that, then, either they're just throwing a whole bunch of resumes out there, you can kind of weed through that, or they're, being successful in, actually following directions. Because one of the big things is, with the resumes in conjunction with the disc, you're able to kind of start weeding people out quickly. I will say one thing that I realized, while I think friends are great in finding resources, sometimes that puts you in a bad position, especially when a client would like to become, an admin person that, may or may not be the right fit. So just be careful where you're posting your job postings. Um, is one lesson I learned. And Pam, I see you shaking your head on that one too. That was a lesson I learned very early on. Was I really kept to kind of like the employment sites and reached out to specific people that, may or may not have known someone that would work, well with me. So I think that was another key thing.
Is
Tony Robbins has a free disc profile. I know many of us probably on this call have done Tony Robbins. That's a good kind of free workaround if you're using like Indeed to post or something like that. The last few times I've hired folks, I shifted over to Wise Hire. That's a little bit more expensive, but they do, they do kind of some pre-qualification for you and have their own disc profile, which I felt was pretty helpful for me. And as we're looking for, another person for our team, we'll use that same thing again.
Reneé,
Yeah.
is your assistant, are they like an SC versus a DI who's like not detail oriented?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, when you read, and I actually have a link on this too. I mean, I think most people will say the higher S's and C's make the better. I will tell you, I've had really good luck, and I don't know if it's because of how personalities jive. I don't mind someone that is a little bit higher of a D, which I know that's probably going to make some people cringe. But I find that it works better with my personality. So again, through years of experience, you kind of learn who works better with your personality. I
Yeah.
think the reason why most people say S and C is because, tend to be more cautious, more detail oriented, those type of things. Whereas salespeople, right, we're typically a higher D or D and I,
Yeah.
which could care less about the details, right? So I'm kind of like a weird hybrid. I don't know. So like I said, for me, I found that hiring someone that did have, some D was a better fit for my team. And I think you learn that as you grow. I mean, we talked about this last week too, you know, who who works right now might not be the same person that works 5 years from now or 10 years from now, right? And I mean that's inclusive of not just your assistant, but everyone.
Yeah.
Because as your business grows, your needs are going to grow differently too. So so yeah, I think that's a good generic way is the SNC, but at the same token, um, I'm happy to give someone a chance if I think they're going to be a hard worker. As long as I'm not kind of square, you know, square peg round hole kind of thing, as long as I see that there's potential there and they have expressed interest. I mean, last year was interesting because we had to hire a second assistant or staff member. I hired two like really horrible ones. I don't know if I was just off my game or what happened, but just weren't, on paper were perfectly good fits, all their why can I not think of the name of, it's not resource like referrals or recommendations. Why can I not think of what, when someone gives you their people, who is that? What is that called? I can't even think about it.
Recruiter?
No, like
References.
yes, thank you, Ann. Oh my God. I don't know why that, but the references checked out. I mean, like everything, and I always now at this point, actually have my team meet with everyone too, because I like making sure that everyone is, on the same page. But the references checked out and everything, they just weren't good fits. They weren't the speed to get things done and just different things like that. We just had to go ahead and move on. So those were hard conversations to have, because one person I hired, I don't know what made me ask this question, but I point blank asked her, I said, well, are you interviewing for other jobs? And she hesitated. And I was like, okay, well, that was a whole week into our first hire, that hire, that I was like, okay, well, I don't really have much of an option other than to just go ahead and fire her, because if you're already looking for another job, and you've only been at a job for a week, you pretty much know the answer, to that. So follow your gut. While yes, again, going back to that S&C, they might be a good fit on paper, but maybe they're just not a good fit on team. And I think so many of us have made hires late, and so you're kind of scrambling trying to make that hire versus planning for that hire, which gives you a lot more time to be able to interview and kind of deeper dive. Do some Facebook stalking. It is crazy what you will find out about people. I've even used some of my best friends that know me really well to interview people. I don't remember who gave me that idea, but it was actually a really good one, because it saved us hiring someone that wasn't a good fit that I couldn't see on the surface, but one of my really good friends picked it up. And thank God, because that would have been, a nightmare hire. So, rely on those other resources that you have. It's funny, like I said, when you're trying to make decisions, especially under pressure, you're probably not making the best decisions. So I'm always an advocate for, while it is scary when you're committing to salaries and those type of things, or even an hourly, however, you decide to structure it. It is scary, but it will be okay. Worst case scenario, if it's not working, then, you part ways. And I think I've always been really conservative with that. And what I have realized is it constrains growth over time too. Or like I said, forces you to make a bad decision on a hire that if you were more thorough about it, you probably could have avoided. Because like I said, that first two weeks to a month is, very steep learning curve and a lot of time commitment on your side. I know that was a long-winded answer to your question, but did that
No,
help?
it was great. Thank you.
All right. Putting a great job description together, I think that's, I mentioned that briefly, but again, when you have, when you know your strengths and weaknesses, when your values, kind of where you're trying to go with your team, I think it's very easy to create a good job description. Again, just search on Indeed and look. I mean, again, all this stuff takes a little bit of time, but that hour of time will save you a lot of pain in the long run. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Find some job descriptions that you like, make sure, you can tweak it. I think even, I think with WiseHire, if I'm remembering correctly, they actually do the description for you. You can adjust it, however you see fit. But WiseHire, I think the advantage with them is they get it out into all the different portals. LinkedIn has been another great resource for me too, in finding good quality people. And like I said, going back to leveraging your your network. But again, when you can succinctly put, you know, a description together that you feel like is a really good description of the job and kind of your character and those type of things, I think that helps attract the right people. Let's see. Just looking back at my notes here. Resume, I don't know if everyone will agree with this, but reading through people's resumes, what I noticed is there are a lot of typos. And so for me personally, that is a huge issue for me, especially if you're going to be communicating with our clients. If you can't get your resume right, and maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on that, you know, to me, that's a red flag. Again, going back to that attention to detail item. So, you know, I maybe would be a little bit forgiving on that, but, you know, again, put those kind of tests in there so you can kind of, especially when you start getting the applications, figuring out how to rank people. So you know who you need to spend some time with on a phone call, who then, you know, kind of goes to that next point, which is an in-person meeting. And keeping in mind what your value is, how much is my time worth, really will then help you focus on those things that are important to you. You will need to put an employment manual together just to be in compliance with the state. It also makes it a lot easier to fire, you know, people based on that with our state. I also have an NDA or non-disclosure agreement. You know, of course, these people are pretty intimately familiar with a lot of details about your life. So, you know, that's also, I think, an important thing to include too. But trying to think what else. Any questions from anyone?
What were some of the signs you were seeing that you were like, when you were like, hey, I'm working 100 hours and I'm doing like you said, Marty said, $10 an hour work, and it's like, what were some of those things that like, a lot of it like we do, right? It's like Cassidy and I are like always constantly doing sky slope entries, going over contracts. Like we'll give each other a contract, make sure there's no typos or we didn't miss anything. So I know like those little things. What else were some like kind of flags and indicators that you're like, you know what, I want to stop doing this and I'm just going to hire someone?
Yeah, I think like you're saying, kind of, you know, data entry. I think the data entry piece in real estate is such a time suck that pulls you away from the activity. So I think some of the key signs for me, you know, like I said, it was just I was running around all over the place, and recognizing that I was dropping a ball here or not getting something done over here that I really wanted to do. So you kind of get caught up in the day-to-day activities versus the activities that are really going to move your business forward. And like I said, it doesn't mean that you want to sell 100 homes a year. Maybe you want to sell 40, but you keep getting stuck at 20. A lot of times it's just a time constraint, because obviously you're good at selling homes.
Mm-hmm.
It's just figuring out, you know, what task can I take off my plate? So like, for instance, you know, any data entry, like getting things loaded into SkySlope or whatever, I couldn't even, if I'm being honest, tell you how to even do that right now. I mean, I'm sure I could jump in there and do it, but you know, again, we've got some really solid staff that I trust to make sure that we get paid, right? Ultimately, that's at the end goal. But I think that if you're having to refer business out, that was another key indicator for me after I hired an assistant and kind of got those things in order. I still didn't have the capacity to take on all the business that we were doing, and I was referring out. So I started my team later than I should have, looking back, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's not much you can change about it. But I think if you're doing more than 3 and 4 hours of just administrative work during the day, like the data entry, like scheduling appointments, you know, whatever. I'm trying to think any other task.
Like vendor management, something I would think, right? Like if you're doing like you mostly do listings, so it's like getting the photographer out there, getting maybe a GC out to look at the place before you list it to catch any issues that are wrong with the place, so you're aware of them, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, any of those kind of things. Like I said, if that's taking up, you know, if you're, I'll tell you, because this is the one thing that most people don't like doing is prospecting. If you're doing administrative tasks to fill your day to get out of prospecting, I think that's another key metric to say, okay, you know what, that's what I'm good at, even though I don't really want to do it, but I know that's what I need to do to move my business forward. So I think, um, that, and then just if you're, what was happening with me is I was working, the normal business hours, right? Like 8 to 5, doing what I needed to with clients. But then the problem was, I'd stop for dinner and then I was working, 7 to 10, just doing administrative tasks.
Yeah, that's what I
So
found out. Yeah.
yeah, and so it wasn't really setting me up well for the following day, right? Because I had already started work at 5 a.m. in the morning, right, to do more administrative tasks, to then be able to meet with clients like 8:30, 9 o'clock. Um, and it was, so I was doing, 8 hours of just client stuff and then 8 hours of administrative stuff. So I think, and that takes a toll on your body after a while. Granted, I was in my early 20s, so a lot more energy than I have now, but um, it wasn't healthy. It was just a bad cycle because I think another test is when you're giving up things that you enjoy doing. Like I wasn't able to go walk or hike or ride my bike, or I mean,
Right.
gosh, for that matter, even vacuum my house, right? So you start really learning kind of that leveraging of time. And I think for a lot of people, what's difficult is that losing of control. But if you have the right people in the right seats, you you're okay with it, right? I mean, like now obviously this has grown to way more than, just an assistant, right? I mean, you got office manager, client care manager, someone that puts the signs in, someone that, a runner to do the lock boxes, like all of that type of things to help with vendor coordination. Um, I think it's just recognizing how many hours are you really spending on administrative tasks. And I think that's where when an agent really sits down and tracks their time, because that's what we even did. I see Rebecca, I think, is on this call, so she's, my office manager. What we realized is, okay, Rebecca, what are you really spending your time on? Because that's your next step, right? Then it's, okay, well, now I need to free you up to do the activities that are more on your level, and then hire someone to kind of help you, right? So it's kind of a cool effect when you start doing it the right way. And then I'm doing the things like the going out on appointments, the prospecting, the, kind of rainmaker type activities that I need to be doing to make sure that the team, and myself are hitting our goals. Does that help answer that question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what did you, right now, if you were to hire assistants from scratch, what would you pay them? Right, there's a lot of demands for jobs. People lost jobs, so you can maybe be a little bit more picky. But if you want the right person, you're gonna pay for quality, right? Versus,
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like I'm a little bit out of touch with the current, market is for that. I mean, obviously, when I first hired my first assistant, and I wouldn't even say that I necessarily have an assistant now, right? Like I have a true office manager. Um, I think a lot depends on how many hours and if you're doing it salary versus hourly. And so what I would do is, when I was kind of establishing whatever that pay was going to look like, I obviously talked to other agents that had maybe recently hired an assistant and see kind of, where they're at, and then kind of work from there. And then also kind of scour the Indeed ads, because a lot of times they'll put, because you need to put some sort of starting pay, right? I think I would say probably most administrative positions at this time, I would say probably, are anywhere from $14 to $18 an hour, if I had to take a guess. Um, and again, looking back, as you stress so much over 1,000 or $2,000 over a year's time frame, but then you get the right person, um, was that really worth, stressing so much over? So I think,
yeah, it's 30 grand, right? So do you think it's more beneficial to provide a salary? Um,
I think it all depends. When I had someone that was there like 15 to 30 hours, we did more hourly.
yeah, that
And I
makes
think,
sense.
again, that was just me being a little bit scared about committing to a salary. It was funny because last year during COVID, I had to make another hire and I committed to another salary. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, am I crazy for doing this? But, we needed to, because we were so busy. And, you know, I think it really just kind of depends on what you feel comfortable doing. And if it's a situation where you feel like, okay, well, I could do this part-time, right, to try it, I think what you'll realize is, oh, I can get a lot more tasks off my plate as you start trusting that person. So I would encourage you to make sure that that person's maybe someone that could eventually go full-time or maybe has ambitions to go full-time. So again, that can all change, in that process. Um, what you start with and what you end with could be two completely different numbers. But what did that come out to? Like at
It's right under 30,000. So you just, it's 2080 times whatever the hourly is.
yeah, so I would probably say, again, I think you'd have to get into bonus structures and things like that.
Yeah, that was my
Um,
next question. Cause like, what do you do to, if someone applies and they're like, well, I have 4 other agents that want me. How are you incentivizing if
yeah, which I guess at that point you'd really have to find out, okay, what are you looking to get paid? I mean, and there's been situations where people were making significantly more than I was comfortable with, where I felt like, hey, this person would make a really good fit, but ten or $15,000, that wasn't something that I was comfortable with.
yeah,
Um, especially when you're hiring your first. I think that's such a big moment, right? When you're hiring your first assistant. It don't overcommit or feel uncomfortable. I mean, I think you're going to feel uncomfortable about it, but also feel comfortable with what you're offering someone to.
yeah,
So I would just ask around, and like I said, just go on Indeed. I mean, I haven't had to do that in a little bit, so obviously those numbers could change. And again, I think it comes down to if the person's going to be part-time or full-time, when you're putting salaries together or packages, whatever that might be. And a lot of times, we always do a bonus structure too, because of course, when there's busy months, I don't think most people are working, 8 to 5. We recognize that on our team. So we do try to put bonus structures in place for those, based on production. So that way, when the whole team is doing well, everyone's doing well.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think someone just put in the chat box, I think it will vary too based on if someone's licensed or not licensed. So I have hired unlicensed with the expectation that they will get licensed, um, during a certain window of time, and also put, a bonus structure on that too. And then also reimbursement for those classes, you know, based on, hey, if you're here a year, I'm happy to, reimburse for those classes, or, certain benchmarks. So you're tying in, bonus structures and things like that to benchmarks within the business.
And then do you have like a ladder, like, hey, if someone's your assistant, oh, I want to be an agent because I did get licensed. So you let them become like a buyer's agent and then rehire someone.
So what's the question? Has
Have
that
you had
happened?
them I guess like Mackenzie, right? You did that. You worked for Kina as a coordinator, then you said, you know what, I want to be a real estate agent. Does that happen where
I haven't personally had that happen, but it's not to say it might not. So yeah, I mean, at that point, then yeah, you hope that you have. I think, and I'm sure I can't speak for Mackenzie. Maybe she can pipe in here a little bit, but um, you know, I feel like at least with my staff, if one of them decided to transition into that, if that's what they chose to do, that we would obviously have a plan in place for that, just to make that transition a little bit easier, at least in finding, another staff.
Hi, Renee. It's Mackenzie.
Hey, Mackenzie.
Yeah. How are you?
Doing good.
Yeah. So it was always, John, like it was a discussion we had before I was hired, that I would stay in this position X amount of time, and then transition eventually into becoming a full-time agent. And so we certainly had that conversation. And then we transitioned, the new listing coordinator at this time before I left, and we did all of that coordination. So that was a discussion. They certainly asked me that, what was going to be my future ambition coming in on the team. And we had that discussion before. So it was always kind of in the forefront. And then we just put things in place before I officially left. that position. And then of course I'm still here if, anyone needs help, but then Kelly's a rock star anyway, so she knows more than I do.
But yeah, so I think, to Mackenzie's point, that was a pretty transparent conversation up front. And I think that's just something, as an employer, right, in that interview process, and I'm assuming, Mackenzie, that's when that came up, was through that interviewing
It did.
process, that, you're asking the right questions to really kind of determine what someone's goals and what their, in hoping everyone's goals align too, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing, because at least someone gets really good training before they go out into the real world of real estate, because let's face it, we know our real estate classes don't really prepare us for what's really happening.
I mean, I wish every agent could have the experience I had and just what I learned in the back end systems, for sure. But I do think if you're going to hire somebody, what are their goals? Because you don't want to invest. It's tough to invest a ton of time in somebody and then get them exactly where they want to go, and then realize that they, want bigger or different things. And then you've used all that time. So I thought it was a great question they asked, and I was pretty transparent in what my overall goals were, for sure.
Yeah, and I know, that's a specific question I ask in the interview process, with the understanding that things can change. For instance, with Mackenzie, she could have decided, what, I've decided I don't want to go into sales, and they're going to figure out, she's a good employee. They're going to figure out, where to utilize her strengths and weaknesses. So I think, being flexible as an employer, and, I think our whole goal, right, is that everyone wants to be on the team, that they're invested in the success of the team, and helping everyone, move forward on their goals. So, I mean, you're not going to keep someone in a position if they're not, happy with that, or if their end goals don't, line up with that either. Any other questions? It's always hard to do these without having the, I guess, interaction, so to speak.
I know, I agree. Sometimes I feel like I'm talking to myself.
I know, I'm like, hi, yes, Renee, I can see my head here bobbling around.
So I do have a quick question. We've been talking a lot about admin and transactional support, but also growing a team is, getting some agents potentially on your team too. So when did you have that aha moment of, I need some help, I have extra leads, and potentially it's an opportunity to bring on a buyer's agent? When was that? What did that kind of look like for you?
Can I ask a question too? Because you said you were giving out referrals, right? So when you hire someone on, is that more beneficial? Well, I guess it is more beneficial because you're making your revs higher, because your referral, you're only going to get 25% back, right?
Yeah. So I think my aha moment, Pam, if I'm being honest about it, when I got pregnant with Elise, I recognized that I was going to have to make some changes, because I couldn't continue on the path. I mean, and this was with an assistant at that point in time, who was very helpful to me. When I needed some coverage, she kind of functioned as a, I always tell everyone, it's kind of like a Jack or Jill of all trades, right? I always find it really hard to put that description in place, because that particular person at that point in time, she was licensed and was able to help me with some showings when I was double booked or things like that. But at some point, again, you're reaching the capacity of what two people can do. And that was kind of my, we had so much administrative work to do during the day. There was no way that, between the sales I was doing and the administrative work she was doing, we had to bring someone else on. So I think what I was recognizing is, oh my gosh, I'm referring all this business out, getting that, quick 25%, great. But then the problem was, I kind of think of everything as a tree, right? I was lopping off a whole branch of business, right? Because what I didn't think about, at that time, just because that was simple and easy to do, a lot of times with my particular business, 85% of it's repeat or referral. So I realized as soon as I was cutting that limb off, there went probably 10 other, future business opportunities. So that became really apparent. Obviously, again, some great mentors with Marty and Sharon kind of, I think, pushing me along on that too. I mean, I literally was, I think, 7 or 8 months pregnant when I made my first buyer's agent hire. So, and I don't even know, I think I had like 35-ish homes under contract just by myself. And I'm like, what am I doing? So that was really, I mean, I joke with people that having or getting pregnant and having Elise was probably the best thing that happened in my business, because it really forced me to change how I was doing things. So that was really how that team started growing. And very quickly, even after that first buyer's agent hire, I think I brought another one on, which was Robin. I think that was like maybe 6 months later. And then we've, just slowly each year have, continued to add another agent, in the process. And obviously, as we need more support, getting more support people in place too.
Do you wait for you to have a need, or do you say, or do you kind of plan like, this is what I want my roles to look like this year, so to support that, therefore I may need, kind of walk me a little bit about.
I mean, I think if I'm going to be honest about it, and with Rebecca on this call, I guess I do have to be really honest. You get to the point where you're taxing people and you can see that you're taxing people, right? Because again, I think when you hire those right people, they're so good at getting things off your plate that you're like, oh, well, they could do this, they can do that, they can do this. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, how many hours are you working a week, right? So I think it's important to really kind of check in with, especially that first really key hire that you make, that is committed and invested in your business too, right? Because I mean, you work closely together to really keep that dialogue open. We hired later than I was expecting, but part of that was, we needed to add another agent to make the numbers look right, to hire, another salaried staff. So I think, yeah, I mean, I'd like to say I was proactively doing that, but I think some of it's been, more, oh, we need this. But the problem is that puts you in like a kind of a disadvantage too, because it can take a couple months to hire the right, person.
If for agents too, there have been times where we've just met people, right? When we were like, wow,
Yeah.
we need you probably on the team. Number one, I don't want you to be my competition, but there's so much opportunity. So maybe we try to figure something out.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's always ways to increase that lead gen to make sense of it, within reason. And again, I think it all depends on what you want your ultimate team to look like. I don't have aspirations for, a 15-person team. At least right this moment, I don't, but I do have aspirations to have a couple more buyer's agents and, another staff and potentially another listing person. And I think I'll feel okay with that. I don't know, when I get there, maybe I'll feel differently, but, I think for me, I've been really conscientious about how I've hired. And I hope, that I've created a good work culture in the process too.
So as you scale, Reneé, right? Like, do you find yourself like as you're growing, you're heavy on buyer's agents? Do you find yourself like you're spending more money on like Zillow leads or whatever lead gen system you're using, or are you relying on the people you're hiring to have those repeat customers? And
yeah, I think I will say my team probably functions a little bit different than most. I mean, we have a very, very solid referral base and repeat business. So, I mean, I have tried, because I think what they say is 60% should be kind of repeat and referral, 40% from new business sources. I mean, we have wholeheartedly tried to move that needle. And the best that we're able to do is kind of get that to 81%. But I also don't have the gigantic marketing bills, everywhere because of that. So
yeah.
I don't know what's right there, right? I don't know what the right answer is.
So like Marty's powerhouse marketing, right? So I mean, Marty probably spends $50,000 a month on marketing. I probably would guess.
Yeah. So, I'm a big believer in looking at your P&L statement every month.
Yeah,
and, having a solid bookkeeper, I think, is helpful, because that will really help guide you to, there's so many different, ways that you can proportion the profits of your business and those type of things. The last last 3 years, I've really been focused on that to kind of even out. And I will tell you, proportionally, our marketing is probably a little bit light for acquiring new business. But again, we're in that situation that unless we bring on another buyer's agent, I don't see the point in spending a whole bunch more money on marketing budget, because we can't even keep up with the leads that we're getting now.
Yeah.
Or following up with them appropriately. So I don't know if that answered your question, Pam, or not on that, but I always feel like it's a long-winded answer to a lot of these questions. But
I would probably like to look at your books compared to others. I mean, I appreciate the fact that you don't spend a ton on marketing and you have a really fruitful business. But
yeah, well, and I think where we spend our
team.
Oh, what was that? I'm sorry, Pam.
I said there's other opportunity there if you wanted that type of team, right? To grow, to have larger agents and to kind of escalate your marketing, but that's not how you're currently set up.
Yeah. And I mean, and then again, that's what I appreciate about real estate. I mean, I think we've all gotten to different points doing things a little bit differently, not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but we might spend more money, for instance, on a marketing budget of making sure our clients get a baby gift, or making sure, a little bit more highly personalized, which what I'm recognizing, right, as we grow, I mean, I think we did, about 147 transactions last year. I didn't meet a lot of those people. I have no clue who they are. I don't know them personally. And so, we're experiencing those different growing pains too about, where the business is moving towards, good and bad, right? That I don't know. I'm not as intimately familiar with all of our folks, and, really having to rely on, the notes and files and things like that. So, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see. Like I said, this will be another year of change. And moving forward that way. But I think really, there's so many different, I think, the Millionaire Agent, that's got, a lot of breakdowns of what, that P&L statement should look like at the end of the year, for proportions, like for salaries, for all these different things. I think that's an important, important concept to be able to see where you can grow and where you can't. So you're not, hiring backwards all the time, which is a lot of times the pattern that I think most get into. Any other questions from anyone?
Well, it can't be just me and John.
I was hoping we were going to have more people on this one today, but anyway.
This is Ann. This has been so helpful, and I feel like what I struggle with is that control thing, where it's like I got to find somebody I trust enough to communicate with my clients, and it totally resonates with me what you're saying about typos and just like kind of the minutia of stuff that I probably just need to let go of to become more productive. I was curious if Reneé or Pam, if you all would be willing, and I came on 10 minutes late, so you may have already said, but if you'd be willing to share your job descriptions that you've used and or any kind of scripts for hiring for an admin.
Yeah, I'm sure I can pull up some old descriptions. Then I don't know. What's the best way for me to get those, Pam? Just
We could put it in the Freedom Builder site as a
like in the discussion. Okay, in the documents. Okay. Yeah, I can definitely pull that together. I mean, again, I think really kind of assessing, because I think there's always some personality that can be infused in those ads too. So I think, certain parts are okay to kind of replicate, but I also think you need to put your personal spin, on that too, because you want to make sure that you're attracting the right kind of people with your, job descriptions also, which
Sure
obviously
thing.
everyone's needs are going to be a little bit different.
I do the same thing that you do also, Reneé. I do searches through Indeed and WiseHire to get some of the language and just kind of
Yeah.
check a few things that I like.
Yeah.
I've worked with hiring companies before too to see what their structure looks like, but it's amazing what you'll find out there that kind of is eye-catching or just sounds kind of different, right? Gets people's
Yeah.
attention.
Oh, I used to love the ads, like how Go Realty, like in Garment Homes, they have some phenomenal job descriptions and kind of, that kind of thing. So, there's a lot of resources out there that you can look and kind of, put your spin on it.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
I had a few people texting me during this, wanting the recording, so you may have some follow-up questions afterwards.
Okay. All right. Well, happy to answer. All right. Well, I guess we could probably wrap it up then.
Sounds good. Thank you so
All
much.
right.
It was awesome. Really.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you, Reneé.
Day.
You're welcome.